I don't know if they took a restroom break or, I hear Peggy talking. I think it's Peggy. I don't know. Tell us when we are live. That's a lot of blueberries. That's healthier than I thought. No wonder it's only 350 calories. It's just a little bit of dough around it. We live. Hi, people. We're waiting for the rest of our committee. We had a little restroom break. We listened to Shenandoah FFA practice their national presentation for FFA Nationals, which I think is still in Indy. There's a couple of us who have noon meetings, so we need to wrap it up a few minutes before noon. Bobby, you say you have a meeting? She's focused on technology. Did you say you had a meeting today? I know you did the last. Say. Okay. Those are good, aren't they? Audience? Can't give anything away these days, except money. Food usually works. Food usually works.
Hanging in there.
Welcome. You can sit. Susan's going to walk around to wherever you want. I think after an hour, we'll all want to walk around. Yes, I think Betsy's on Zoom, and Chad may join us in about 45 minutes, and Betsy may be on Zoom. They've not been a part of this subcommittee. Peggy joined us at the last meeting. So we have 4 of us that are interested, or 5. Is that Betsy? We're missing Angela, but she said she was coming. It takes us a while to get to technology. Ed, I think you'll have to call it back to order, and Susan will call it to order as soon as we... Are we live? Okay. Mm-hmm. Yours is up there.
Should
I didn't know. No, that's up to you. That's up to you. I got my vaccine. I can't breathe with it over my nose, though. I'm not there yet.
We'll call the joint meeting of the council and commissioners to discuss the ARP money to order.
Okay, I passed out agendas, and I passed out basically abstracts of the most important. You need a copy of those. Handouts that I forwarded to you over the past month. And here's that's the abstract, and there's a Baker Tilly thing attached. You need to, okay, we're good. We're going to let them work on the technology. Okay. We do have some people in the audience who'll probably want to comment or ask questions in a little bit. But for right now, to get us going, I passed out two things, the agenda for today. And first of all, are there any updates that anyone participated in any Zooms or conferences over the past 3.5 weeks that you'd like to share if it relates to ARP, which is the American Rescue Plan Act? And I don't think we've received the money yet, have we? By the 11th. From the Treasury. Okay. Well, we'll sit on bated breath and hope we get from U.S. Treasury the guidelines that they've promised upon receipt of the first 50%, and then we get the other 50% no sooner than a year from now. So at this time, if you have an update from any Zoom that you've attended or any meetings you've attended since our meeting on April 9th, would you like to share if it relates to the purpose of this meeting, which is basically information on the ARP, the American Rescue Plan monies that we and others will be receiving? Bobby?
Well, the one that I've only listened to a couple, and sorry, my memory, some days. They suggested that we take about 18 months to plan, since this is a 4-year process. And it was highly encouraged to do joint regional ventures, whether it's partnering with towns, townships, cities, different projects to go regional to leverage that money so it'll go farther. Are the two major takeaways that and I think the regionals are a great suggestion, instead of just us trying to spend our money and either Newcastle or Knightstown or whoever trying to spend their money, or even Wayne County or Delaware County trying to spend their money, that we all try to leverage, do a regional and try to leverage so the money will go further.
Anyone else attend or read or either Zoom or a meeting? I know the AIC, David mentioned some things at the end of that meeting, and he stressed collaboration with towns within your county, as well as when you, no, it's live.
Do you have to, talk into it, because they can't hear you if you don't have it right up against you talking.
Oh, you mean at home? Okay. David, who's the president of AIC, the Association of Indiana Counties, we had our District 6 meeting in Shelbyville the day before yesterday, the 4th. And congratulations to our auditor, who is the elected president of District 6, which is like 10 or 11 counties in East Central Indiana, for next year. And the Randolph County auditor was selected vice president for next year for District 6. So congratulations to Debbie. The president, David, most of it was an update on legislation, which took an hour and a half to go through a 30-page PowerPoint. But there's a lot of legislation. They said it was maybe a little bit below average number of passed bills, but some of them were very significant. Some of it related to monies from the feds to the state, because they got hundreds of millions of dollars, the state. And some of their purposes overlap what's the direction we've been given for the counties. But he did stress collaboration. He did stress thoughtful, strategic planning, especially in 2021. This is our second meeting. They did say that if you haven't started meeting and planning and organizing and thinking about prioritizing potential projects or collaboration, to be doing so. I think he felt most counties had started, and this is our second meeting, but not to pull the trigger and act too quickly, because this is likely a once-in-a-lifetime funds that we're getting, and so we need to give serious thought to it. We do know that the 4 primary areas we mentioned at the first meeting, I don't know if Debbie's involved with the other department chairs on trying to begin calculating 2019 revenues versus COVID-related revenues. That's one of the 4 areas that any deficit or decline in revenues, these monies can be used for that for the county. And I expect more direction from AIC and Baker Tilly, the U.S. Treasury. And as we get those specifics, and we do need minutes to this meeting since it's an official meeting and we're an official subcommittee according to Luke. Okay. Okay, good. I'll just make notes like last time and highlight and send it to you within the next week of what we talked about then. Because one of the things they mentioned is to keep all minutes, correspondence, contracts, accounts payable, vouchers for a future audit, and they mentioned correspondence in meetings. So when we get to that point, we'll need to make sure that we have a paper trail for a future audit, which we will be audited more than likely. The other areas is infrastructure, water, sewer, broadband, we mentioned before. Relating to COVID-19, any kind of, to mitigate the public health emergency and the negative economic impact. So we ask Angela to be here in our steering team because of the health related. She's the expert on what they've gone through. We've asked Corey to be here because of the economic impact relating to small businesses and the downturn. I heard on the news today that there's a pool of money for restaurants that's released from the feds to the state today, and applications could start like immediately. It's kind of like what we gave available to local restaurants. I don't recall the number of how many.
I can't remember the exact amount, but Restaurant Resiliency Fund. Yeah, so there's the SBA, federal has a Restaurant Resiliency Fund, and then the state has 2 grant programs, and they can be found on backontrack.in.gov. There's a more general grant program, and then the second program is for hospitality and entertainment businesses by NAICS code, the industrial, or the way they classify themselves on their tax return. So the second one is more restrictive in terms of type of business. The first one there at the state level is more general. So there are numerous opportunities for businesses to apply. It is nationwide, at least the SBA one. And so what I'm reading on those programs is the funds will be obligated very quickly.
There are grant applications at the state for those kinds of things and at the federal level.
Yes.
And Eric Fry from ARA mentioned, and I shared this with you, CDBG and Okra are going to be having applications of monies filtered to them through the state, pretty much like Stellar was. And we'd have to have grant applications for that. And that probably would be competitive, I would assume. But there are hundreds of millions of dollars being pumped into Indiana and local communities, including counties, cities, and towns. Cities over 50,000 get a different piece of the pie than towns under 50,000. So I think it's like 20 cities in Indiana meet that 50,000 plus. They'll be getting their monies directly from the U.S. Treasury as counties, The towns get it filtered to the state, and then the state to the towns less than 50,000. So even Newcastle, even though they're getting like $3.5 million, that'll be coming filtered through the state of Indiana, the treasury to the state, and the state to the towns and cities. I believe Anderson would be one. That would be 50,000. Muncie was one. Richmond was not, because Richmond's under 50,000, so they'll have to wait to get theirs from the state of Indiana. These summaries that I gave you, one of them that I'd like to highlight is number 4 from, I think it's Cherry Beckert. There's a company like Baker Tilly that gives advice. They reminded that these are one-time, non-recurring funds to avoid creating new programs or add-ons to existing programs that require ongoing financial commitment, because we probably won't have ongoing funds coming. So we have to make sure if we start anything that we can, in the future, when these funds go away, that they will survive and prosper without additional inputs. They stress that probably critical infrastructure is particularly well suited because it'll have a long-term impact. And again, they keep stressing water, sewer, and broadband. We also know a lot of money is being pumped from the feds and the state, particularly for broadband. So that might be one of those things, Bobby, when you said wait 18 months, to just see where the dust settles from the feds and the state, because there's also a multi-trillion-dollar bill of infrastructure being talked about in Congress. And I would suspect, since they emphasized broadband in ARP, that they're going to emphasize broadband, bridges, roads, and a whole lot more in any infrastructure bill that may or may not be passed. So that might be one we want to hit the pause button on. We have been contacted. I think Susan was contacted by one of the utilities in Henry County, putting a plug in for broadband. And so people are aware there's a pool of money that's not very unusual that we normally don't have.
And
Could I?
Isn't Farm Bureau going to release something about broadband next week? Because
Okay.
they said hold off on any of this money because they're going to make a big announcement next week.
Oh, good.
about broadband.
Good to know. I hadn't heard that.
I have a question. I don't know if anybody here can answer it about broadband. Do we have any idea how much money it would take to get broadband throughout Henry County?
Millions and millions and millions and millions. A lot.
Just hold the mic.
Corey has numbers.
Hopefully that's not the one that's, is it got a green light on it?
Breaker 19, breaker 19. Okay.
10-4, good buddy.
So there was a study done a couple years ago, and I'll try to find that study and send it to you all, and then you can confirm what I'm doing from memory here. So there's my, I believe it was 45 million. And that study was done on behalf of the Henry County REMC in consultation with the Indiana Statewide Cooperatives Association. And it would consist of primarily linking towers, communication towers, that were already in the county, and maybe installing a few more. And that would be the backbone for a system to serve all of Henry County.
That would be wireless, right? Or that would connect, the fiber that you go all the way across?
The safest thing for me to say is I don't know.
Because last meeting we were talking about how you can't do it without fiber, right?
Yeah,
Is that this meeting?
right.
Okay. We can't be, right? We can't do it completely wireless. So what does that look like then? You use the towers to connect fiber poles? Is that you, Bobby?
No, I'm IT, but not that side of IT.
Well, that's helpful, but if it is approximately 45 million, then even though this is a windfall for us at 9 million plus, it would just make a small dent in trying to get broadband throughout the county. Of course, there's other broadband money that's going to be coming down the pike. And certainly we try to get in on that money also. But as far as this 9 million goes, it really wouldn't. There's so many other things we can do with that within the county. And it's a little too early to decide what percentage or how much of this could go that way. But we certainly have to look at what other money is available, because this wouldn't even make a dent in broadband for Henry County.
Yeah, if we were commit, for example, $1 million, that's 1/45th, and if that was 2 years ago, probably 1/50th of what it would take to put broadband or fiber throughout the whole county. So it would be a drop in the bucket, like a neighborhood or two. So. Anything else? Because I'm definitely not going to monopolize this. So the negative impacts to like small businesses, I'm sure you have ideas. Public health emergency, Angela will have ideas. Infrastructure, we're going to kind of put on hold to see what the state and the feds are coming down the pike. And the other area that is of interest to me is to respond to workers performing essential work during the pandemic with premium pay, which could be up to $13 an hour over what they had been given for a maximum of $25,000. So I'm sure that they're going to, in the U.S. Treasury, define better the premium pay for essential work. You know, what comes to mind since she just walked in would be somebody from the health department. This is National Nurses Day. It's also the National Day of Prayer, so we should have probably started this with prayer as we do our council meetings. So at any rate, these are two important days. I could go on for an hour, and I'm not going to, about the essential nature of doctors and nurses with me personally, is why I'm here. So kudos to all those people who have sacrificed unbelievably over the past 14 months and saved a lot of lives in this country and around the world. So kudos to them. What we're talking about, Angela, is basically we've talked about the 4 areas, any Zoom or meetings that we've had. They've emphasized since our first meeting on the 9th that we not hurry into this, that we be very deliberate and very strategic. One of the things I was going to bring up is, does anyone disagree that maybe our arrangements and makeup of this kind of focus around the areas of emphasis that we know of, which would be like infrastructure, COVID-19 health related, business downturn related. They keep mentioning in all the legislation the essential workers, perhaps extra pay for those who went through hell and back over the past 14 months, and our reduction in revenues during COVID. And we said at the last meeting that the reductions, that information we've gotten so far is that it's not been as great of reduction as what was originally anticipated from the states. For example, Highway, Joe Wiley, a year and a half ago, was told to cut 18% from his proposed budget. And by the time we met in budget hearings in August, they had reduced that to 6%, saying that people were still driving. There was gas tax coming in. There were people still registering their vehicles at the BMV, so those registration monies were coming in. And so the 18% was cut 67% down to 6%. So I don't know, Debbie, when we get to the point of how we're going to calculate, I'm hoping that the feds and the state will give us AICs and other agencies, Baker Tilly perhaps, on calculations how to really determine the reduction in revenues that we've had. But that Cherry Beckert said that's one of those things that we really ought to emphasize. That's a given. We know the monies are safely, any reduction we have, and whether it's property tax, which I don't think there had been much. Thank goodness people got their payment from the feds, and Bill Upchurch, our treasurer, said a lot of people came in with that check, said, I'm going to pay this first because I know this is an obligation. And I don't know if he anticipated that, but he was somewhat surprised that the monies received through the treasurers for property taxes last year in 2020 were not down significantly. In fact, they were, according to AIC spreadsheet they gave us, they were up a little bit. And also, what was that extra money we got this week? Supplemental lit. And that was nearly $1 million.
1.1 million,
I think it was one, yeah.
something like that. Mm-hmm.
Was that, how's that compare with previous, like a year, 2 years ago, do you know?
We got it last year about the same amount, but these are the 2 years we've got it. We hadn't got it previously. The supplemental is just what is in this, at the state over what we had estimated they had paid us. It was what we got over the estimate. How much was that? I think it was 1.1, 1.2.
Was it the county share?
Yes.
Yeah.
So the other entities that receive lit also received, I guess, a portion of that?
Not everybody, but most. City of Newcastle did, Middletown, Knightstown, I'll go get the paperwork and show you.
Most of them did.
Henry County got $1,151,262.
That was supplemental over what was projected a year ago,
So
and there were
it
extra.
performed better than projections. And that's the local income tax.
Yeah, the lit, yes. Most counties, they reported at that meeting that all but about 10 counties got,
I think, yeah, 80, I think they said 81 counties out of 92 got
so
supplemental
11
lit.
counties didn't get it, but most counties did, and we got over $1 million. But also, remember Baker Tilly telling us this next 2 years is going to be a shortfall, not when you calculate the ARP and some of these other things that are coming in our midst, but to expect most shortfalls in 2021 through 2023. And we haven't seen the beginning of that because, as you know, things are delayed a year as far as income and revenues, just like the property taxes, how they're paid a year behind. Other thoughts? Again, I do not want to monopolize this discussion.
I've had several suggestions from different entities or different people. Township trustee reached out to me asking, because the townships are not getting any funding, if they would be available to receive or be a part of this, because once the programs go away, their money will dry up for a lot of help for people.
Yeah, the towns are getting it, but the trustees
The
per se are not.
Right, the trustees are not, the towns are. And then I've also had people suggesting Geyer Opera House, the places that had to shutter, Geyer Opera House, Wilbur Wright Museum, all of those that had to shutter. And again, the local fire departments, they weren't able to do any of their fundraising that they always do throughout typically their fundraiser is spring and fall, not necessarily in the winter, to bring monies into the local volunteer fire departments as well. So I just wanted to also, maybe the infrastructure. I think when we first knew that this was coming in, I think my first comment was, we have 3 interchanges on the interstate in the county, and this would be a perfect opportunity to help build those up in some way or fashion.
I don't want to, but I It's okay. It's all right. With regard to the rural volunteer fire departments across the county, is there an assessment of their equipment and equipment needs? Is that type of information available? Because
I'm sure we could, I mean, I don't have a problem contacting all of them and getting all of them. I know Strawn's needs. I know Caddis's, I know some of the smaller departments. Basically, they all have needs, quite frankly.
I mean,
but we could probably get all of that information, yes, either from the trustees or from the fire departments themselves.
We should probably put out a request for people.
Yeah. Exactly.
and I
They have,
emphasize the word needs.
Radio problems.
Needs, yeah, they have needs. None of them, I don't think, are going for their wants,
Yeah.
because their wants are, when you have a pumper truck that's $25,000, but you can get it for $5,000, they're going to go for an older $5,000 truck versus their want of the brand new or newer to them, because none of them have $25,000 to spend on a
This
pumper truck.
could be
Yeah.
this could be an opportunity to bolster that infrastructure
Yeah.
for fire protection
Yep.
in the outlying areas of the county.
And just like Ed was getting ready to say, radios, there's a need for the 800 radios, because some of that is going to be, for lack of a better word, end of life, I think. So there's a whole host of needs in the county that one-time money, I mean, ask. I don't know that ask and you shall receive, but ask and you shall be considered.
You mentioned buying used equipment. Our highway department has been the prime example of buying 5 to 10-year-old equipment that's been assessed as being well taken care of, like from Noblesville last year, versus paying 2 to 3 times more for a brand new. So we have a history of buying good used, and usually the people go out and assess, they have knowledge of equipment and can tell and look at the service records. Our last 2 Joes of the highway department have done, because they just don't have the money to go out and buy hundreds and thousands of dollars of new equipment all over the place.
I would venture to guess that there's probably not either township fire department, town fire department, I won't talk about Newcastle or Knightstown because I don't know their funding, but any of the county volunteer fire departments, I will venture to guess, if they've ever bought any new large equipment, I would be surprised. It's always been, and they wouldn't be able to afford to buy new now. I don't think anyone would want new now, but yeah, they buy new to us, and they're happy with new to us.
Right. Well, I think Joe is looking at, and if anybody has information, correct me if I'm wrong, new paver, because our paver has been put together with Band-Aids and baling wire and made to run with Scotch tape and whatever, duct tape, I should say. It's way past its usefulness. After a certain point, you end up spending more on a used car that's in the shop half the time than what, going out and buying a new one that hopefully will last 20, 25 years, and I think our existing one's at least that old. So we're used to doing that, buying good used, because we really can't afford new. Well, with this, maybe we can afford some new. I don't know yet. Other ideas that you've heard from either constituents, and this might be a time.
Well,
Chair.
one thing, this looks like a big opportunity to partner possibly with even the surrounding counties on some type of in-residence substance abuse, mental health type program. It would eat up, I think, too large a chunk of what we have. But I think if we partnered, I don't think there's a good program really anywhere. There's some type of program in Richmond, which I have observed. I think it is lacking. I think it would be a good time to put together, as you suggest up here, some type of subgroup that could also talk to other counties and we could partner with them. And I wouldn't even think it would be necessary to have it in this county. But right now, we don't have a place to send. Our jail's full. 95% of the people in it are there for substance abuse. It has been that way for many years. And we don't have a program to send them to that's an alternative to jail. Our new jail is going to have a small program that will help JCAP, a number of the people there, but I think the surrounding counties and ourselves need a place where we can send people as an alternative to jail. Certain number of them could go there, and there's nothing like that right now. And that's going to cost a lot of money. Of course, the sustainment part of that will go on into the future, but just getting the facility, we could do that probably with money that's available right now, not necessarily this 9 point whatever million, but there is other government money that would be ideal. And if we had a regional project, we could probably get a pretty good center. And this is probably one of the few opportunities where we're going to get that done. So I think we should try to make contact with the surrounding counties and try to get some type of regional facility that would help us all.
I think that kind of falls into what the governor just released with the READY program. The regional cities and towns, and I believe, I was just pulling that up. And Corey, you may have read more about that than I have.
And I didn't want to talk very much today.
Well, yeah. Governor Halcomb launches regional initiative to invest $500 million in quality of place, talent attraction. Corey, if you want to talk more about that, because like I said, I've read his email, but not enough to, I haven't researched it enough yet to be able to discuss it cohesively.
No pressure.
I'm trying to make it succinct. So in 2015, the governor announced a program called Regional Cities. And it was funded by a tax amnesty program. So the state said, if you owe us back taxes, we're going to give you a window of opportunity to pay us, and then we'll forgive the penalties. And that generated several $1 million. And part of the resources from that was regional cities. And so similar to the program that was just announced. So Henry County joined what is known as a regional development authority. Its other members are Delaware, Blackford, Jay, and us. So that is in place. We're also participants in the 21st Century Talent Region, which is 7 counties. I'm going to try to name them: Fayette, Rush, Wayne, Henry, Randolph, Delaware, and Grant.
What was the name of that ladder?
Grant.
No, I mean, what was the name of that entity?
The 21st Century Talent Region. That, too, came out of the governor's office in the last couple years. If you remember a lady by the name of Blair Milo, she was a cabinet-level secretary. She has subsequently moved to the Indiana Economic Development Corporation. And if you look into the guidelines on this READY program, I promise this is all related. If you look into the READY program, there's a sentence or two that says regions can use the work that they did for the talent region designation as the baseline or foundation for the regional plan that is a requirement to apply for this $500 million. We have a really good baseline or foundation of information. And it's focused on workforce. One of the things is focused on workforce. That's all right.
Please silence your cell phones.
No, hang on. I'm going to make sure my phone's on silent. That would be.
I did mine before
Somebody
I
will
said
call
that.
me, right? Somebody will call me. And
It's always when you're talking.
so yesterday, our 10-county regional group, which is known as the East Central Indiana Regional Partnership, that is led by Mindy Kenworthy. It's the same group that's doing the Forge Your Path, the Quality of Life Initiative. So we talked about the READY program. And the consensus of my colleagues around the table from the perspective, from the respective counties, was that it made sense at this point to explore seriously using the talent region option to put together an application for funding. I provide you all of that boring history to say this. My opinion, based on what I know now, and you know how things change in terms of the rules and the guidelines, I think a regional treatment center would be a fantastic project with a direct line to workforce.
I assume you're not talking sewage treatment.
No. I'm talking about a substance abuse treatment, what Commissioner Tarantino said. Now, I have no idea if it meets the READY guidelines, but if the reasoning or the argument in my mind on the fly here and on the big screen is if our jail, we're not unique in terms of having a jail full of people that have substance abuse issues, if we can help them and get a large percentage of them back into the workforce, that's going to help our region and our employers and our people. So I appreciate you bringing that up. I appreciate you bringing up the READY program. And as I learn more, I'll keep you all in the loop. It very well may be that, so there are 2 planning districts in our region. So when I say planning districts, I mean the planning district led by Jeff Plaster, of which Henry County is a member. That serves the southern part of our region. The northern part of our region is served by a different planning district. I could see a new RDA being formed, a regional development authority, where Henry County potentially withdraws from that RDA and we join a new RDA centered around our current planning district. Now, that's not a requirement. You don't have to be an RDA. You can find a qualified regional not-for-profit to apply for the funds and receive them. But long story short, because we were part of the talent region, and the governor has included the talent region in this READY program, I think we've got a leg up. And my recommendation is to continue to play that, continue to look at that route of participation.
Where does the EIRPC that we pay 14,000 plus per year fall into what you just described? Because our 3-year commitment's up in December 31st, I think.
We only paid 9,000.
Well, that's because the last 2 years, Newcastle has put in their 35% of population.
They cut it in half this year because of COVID.
Okay. So where does the EIRPC fall in the other entities for which we are a part or in which we participate?
This week, they are serving as a catalyst for the member communities, member counties focused on this READY program, and they are being helpful, and I'm going to use the word prod, but I don't mean that negatively. They are challenging us in a very friendly way to figure out how we want to arrange ourselves in terms of applying and competing for this 500 million. So I appreciate their leadership in that regard. So they're serving as what I would call a regional facilitator or a regional broker, which is incredibly helpful. The timeline for this READY is not, and this is where I risk of becoming whiny. You know, it is this program by itself is a once in a lifetime, at least in my career, of what I've seen. Set aside all the other things that are coming down the pike. $500 million from the state of Indiana being made available to regions in collaborative projects. It hasn't happened, and I don't know if it'll ever happen again, so that's really, really good. Where I see some concern or I have some suggestions is you got to define your region by June. You got to have a plan by the end of August. That's tough. And that's why I think the talent region, and I can get you the information, not that you want more stuff to read, but I can get you the information that I think the reason why I'm saying let's go down that route is because we've spent the last 2 years, and when I say we, our office at the Economic Development Corporation in consultation and support with the Chamber of Commerce Workforce Development Committee. So it does have, this work does have some cross-sector community participation via the Chamber's Workforce Development. If you want a quick summary of it, in the most recent Chamber magazine, I wrote my column about the talent region. And so it's not that I want you to read me at all, because it'll put you to sleep, but that is a 300-word summary of the talent region.
Looking at you were talking timeline, it says here, May to July, define regions, July to August, regions develop strategic plans, September to October, committee reviews regional applications, November to December, the state finalizes funding decisions.
Yes.
So it's a pretty quick.
Very quick.
Very quick.
So they set aside 500 million?
Yes. What we're seeing now is 50 million per region.
Okay, for a collaborative project. Because they also set aside money for substance abuse. The state did, right? Is that not right?
I don't know.
Isn't that what Tom said, that they set aside a big chunk of money for substance abuse too?
It is in there's a category of mental health and substance abuse and
I just thought that was earmarked by the state.
healthcare.
I thought there might, but I thought Tom, and we can confirm that.
Just thinking if they've set aside money for regions and for substance abuse, I mean, it's fall in that category.
The two main focuses of the talent region were employer engagement. So making sure that the sectors within our region were coordinated and talking to one another. Addressing the talent needs on a regional basis, because we share a labor shed. 5,800 people leave Henry County on a daily basis. They choose to live here, but they drive out of the county. So we're connected regionally, whether we want to or not. Secondly was birth to 5, high quality child care in early childhood because of our youth. And I was going to say because of our youth poverty rates. If you look at our poverty rates in East Central Indiana among children, we're pretty high. And so, and that has a direct impact on a community's long-term prosperity.
These short timelines, we have to do something right now.
Soon. So fortunately or unfortunately, you'll probably hear more about this from me in an official capacity on any actions that the county should consider taking, particularly as it relates to a regional development authority or entering into a regional agreement in support of applying for the READY funds.
Who else in Henry County is involved in these entities that you just mentioned besides yourself? Are there any council members or commissioners? I know there are on the EIRPC, but these others, I'm not sure we have participation around the table in those. And maybe we don't need to, but that's our lack of knowledge is because I'm not sure that we have direct involvement.
Our office has represented the county, and when I say county, I don't mean county government. I mean geographically the county, in terms of the previous efforts on regional cities. And then the talent region is our office in the Chamber of Commerce Workforce Committee. And I'll get you a list of names. I don't want to do it from memory because I'd leave somebody out.
You brought this up apparently because you think there's an ARP application as we discuss collaboration beyond county government, whether it's with towns or with other counties, that this all fits together with collaborating for larger projects, whether it be substance abuse treatment facility. We know East Central Indiana is high in that area as far as number of people with substance abuse disease. And our jail is just a reflection of that, as other areas in East Central Indiana.
And Council Lady Hoon mentioned the other money, and I'll do some research in terms of if the state has identified some special, what I'll call one-time funding, similar to the READY for substance abuse. I still think the regional approach makes sense on that issue because, as Commissioner Tarantino said, it would be difficult for the county to do it on their own. Yes.
I will mention that we had a reorganization of JCAP a couple weeks ago. The one out of the 6 subcommittees going into the jail preparation and study, the one that kept meeting the longest was Jerry Cash's Alternatives to Incarceration. That group reformulated a couple weeks ago, and we met with the sheriff and Jay and Tina from the jail and Greer from the jail, and Angela was there. Bobby was invited. She got busy. Commissioner stuff. There's a lot of stuff out there that hit that. But anyway, we met to see if that organization was welcome in providing and sharing the research that we had done during that 14 months that we were active which culminated in a visit to the JCAP program in Dearborn County, which is Lawrenceburg. And Greer went, and Tina went, and we found out at the end of the meeting that Angela was there. Correct me if I'm wrong, that we were most welcome to share. The sheriff and the jail people wanted us to be a participant in the planning for that JCAP. Tisha Lindsay, who oversees the supervisor director of the JCAP in Lawrenceburg, said she would actually come up here and meet with us, any group that was interested, on how their very successful JCAP program was organized, and to help us so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. I'm just waiting for her to come back and get with us on a date that she can come up to Henry County and share how she planned for and share the mistakes they made and if they had to redo it. So I think we have some resources available so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. They have one of the most successful JCAP programs in the Midwest, and they patterned theirs after Boone counties. And Kosciuszko County got some grant monies from the state, from the Attorney General's office, and they started a JCAP program. So everyone's kind of copying off the success and best practices and learning from the mistakes of those individuals who went through this. One thing I remember her mentioning, Tisha, was you start with the males instead of the females, and she gave reasons. But if I shared the reasons that she shared with me, I would be a sexist or a misogynist. But she very much, through her experience, says you start with the males for reasons that she gave. And I'll let her share that, why you do that. In our current jail, and again, correct me, those who have memorized the floor plan, I think there's space for 12 males and 8 females, if I'm not mistaken, for 20. She said that is a good start. You don't want to start big. You want to start small and grow it. And she thought that was also a good proportion, because we're going to have more males with this issue of substance. At least historically, that's been the case, though that separation is declining. I mean, it's getting closer to 40, 50, 60% instead of 70, 30 like it once was. It's getting closer to 50-50. So speaking on that, Angela is the other main spoke in the ARP wheel with the health care and the COVID, shoring up the COVID expenses that I'm sure that we still have.
Yes, looking forward, I've got a 1-year plan formulated in my head, and I have a 2-year plan of where the health department is going to be in dealing with the repercussions of what happened, or more frankly, what didn't happen last year with public health care. And so those are the things that Karma's going to come back and get us with that. We had an 85% drop across the state in sixth grade up in immunization rates. We're going to have an outbreak. We're going to have meningitis cases that are going to go up. We are going to have many, many cases of cancer that are going to be in stage 3 and 4 that we should have caught last year because people did not go to the doctor, and they are still not going to the doctor. We have going to have an increase in cardiac rehab clients because those individuals didn't go to the ER. They didn't go to their doctor. They let their medications run out because they didn't want to go and risk going into the doctor's office and they just had an MI because they just thought that's what we had to do because we were quarantined. So these things are going to grow exponentially. One of the things that is coming to mind, I know we don't have representation from the hospital, but I want to remind everybody that it is a county hospital. And it is one of the best kept secrets in healthcare in my mind. And I told them that when I started there 17 years ago and worked for them for a few years, because they are not bought out by a mothership. They are not part of St. Vincent Conglomerate. They are not part of IU Health Conglomerate. They hold their own, and they're very proud of that, and they work very hard to do that.
they have taken a hit, they've taken a loss, and at some point, I would appreciate, us being able to reach out to them. And I can give you a monetary example of that loss this year. So in August, we started the COVID testing site. They're $21,000 in the hole for the little brown barn. And I know that sounds like a lot, but those little buildings aren't cheap. It's heated, it's aired, it has electricity in it, it has the cable for, there's a phone system out there, there's internet and everything. And then to staff that respiratory clinic, that was one of the first things they did. They did it on their own. They didn't ask for help. They just immediately did it. And they pulled all of the respiratory people out of the offices to provide safe havens at the office for those people to entice them to come in and do their regular checkups. We received $100,000. I did through the State Department of Health and contracted them. So I was able to offset the $135,000 that it cost to run that clinic from August the 1st until June 30th of this year. So they have given the community $35,000 in workforce out of their own pocket. That it was strictly just for COVID testing that wasn't ever budgeted for them, in this century. I did receive notice and sent agreement to receive another $50,000 that I will continue to contract with them for July 1 to December 31st. But that's not going to cover the cost of all of, because you're talking salary, fringe, and you know what it is to employ people, healthcare people. And so they're going to take a hit. But I talked to Brian Ring yesterday, and they are interested in continuing that. Why? Because we need it. We have to have it in order to keep the community safe. They shut down their surgery program for many months because it wasn't safe. That is a moneymaker for them, and they took a hit too. And so I'm not quite clear, but my understanding is they're not being provided some of the opportunities that we're being provided in funding, and there's clarity needs to happen. So I'll be willing to reach out and be that spokesperson for the group, but I would like to touch base with them and see what their needs are. And then lastly, we've talked about this multiple times that, if I hear one more time, well, Wayne County this. Wayne County, I'm sorry, has one of the only standing daggone psychiatric hospitals, state hospitals in the state. Okay, so they're light years ahead of us. Reed Hospital has an inpatient psychiatric unit, and then on top of that, they have Meridian. Okay, people, we just have Meridian. They're doing the best they can. And Amanda said, how many therapists is she down? 5. She is short 5 therapists right now, and they can't keep up with the demand. One of the reasons that Henry County Hospital, I think, has been so successful is they know what their limits are, and they have been so financially responsible to their institution over the years that they don't bring on a service line that they don't think that they can maintain. They don't pull on something that is going to hurt them financially. And so mental health has been one of those things that they've never had the opportunity to explore. Last year when we did the year before when we did our community health needs assessment, they were very honest about that, and they said, we're this big. This is what we do, and anything we do, we want to do well. We're not going to do it if we're not going to do well at it. And so, but what they did commit to helping the community in any way they could from that mental health standpoint, because one of the glaring things that came out of that assessment was the mental health. And we always say substance abuse, and I appreciate that, but it goes beyond substance abuse. We have people who have mental health, depression, anxiety, and it is personified 1 million times now this year. I have a very close friend who just this week is going to get some help because, and this is an educated person, you know, but this year has taken a toll on them. They are having to miss work, and it's going to be really difficult. So there's other mental health that leads to substance abuse because people self-medicate. You know, that's a gateway into that. I would love to be able to have a conversation with the hospital. Is this an opportunity for us to give them some seed money to think about or start some type of mental health service line? And it doesn't have to be inpatient by any means, but right now they have one therapist and Mr. Nelson, and then his son, he was getting ready to retire, and his son was going to take over, and I understand that there's some health issues, so they may even be down their therapist before it's all over with. They have hired 2 nurse practitioners. One of them is homegrown, Chris Manning, who I worked with for many years, and she brought with her pediatric nurse practitioner teacher when she got out of school and brought her into this community. So Chris is doing the adults. Her teacher now is working with our children, but that's just 2. And I think there's a lot of room for support that would add to because we talked a lot about transition in JCAP. It's fine to do what we're going to do in those 20 rooms for however long, but they've got to come back out to the community. You know, they've got to come back out and live their lives. And if we don't have that support system, they're not going to succeed. And they're going to be right back in and going through the cycle. So anyway, at some point, can we reach out to the hospital, please, and see what their thoughts are? Maybe invite them to come to the meeting. And I mean, they can speak far more eloquently to their challenges with this. And I love Meridian. I love Amanda. Amanda specifically, historically, Meridian has been problematic. Amanda specifically, in my opinion, has single-handedly turned our Henry County office around. And she's excellent, and we're fortunate to have that. But as we know, it's the only game in the region. You know, they're the only place. So what does Henry County do best? We do things ourselves. We put our boots on, we pull ourselves up by the bootstraps, and we do it. We get it done. And I think we've got a good partner in the hospital. I think we've got a financially sound institution that knows their business, and it's an opportunity to have a discussion with them. Can we help you create a service line or do something to expand your services in the way of mental health across the board?
If amens are allowed, I'm going to say amen.
Yeah, I think that would be appropriate. And I echo what you said about Amanda. She's part of the JCAP group. She's one of the ones, including Jerry, that went down to Dearborn County. She's part of that group that met a week or so ago. And she's been a strong, positive advocate for mental health in our region. So yeah, kudos to the Henry County Health Department for doing yeoman's Herculean work over the past 14 months. I don't think anyone outside of healthcare really knows what the healthcare workers went through on this National Nurses Day.
Well, and I think, and my colleague is just that. And, you know, we are now looking at the suicide rate among medical professionals who have had to be on those front lines in the hospitals. And it's very similar to the PTSD that we see with our veterans. You've got normal people who don't have a military background, and when you have that amount of death in that short amount of time and you have no control over it, we've got to be there for these nurses and for these doctors. We cannot afford to lose one single medical person out of Henry County. We can't. They've got to be a priority for us.
Well, and anyone else that read anything different to what I'm about to say, I think the whole healthcare scene is really emphasized strongly in this ARP legislation. I think they're going to be pretty lenient as to how we plug up, and who else better than our health department and the people at the hospital to tell us where did we fall short, what do we need to shore up if we have another pandemic, and you've experienced it. I was told that if what I had happened 9 months earlier, I would have not survived because they learned so much in those first 9 months as to how to treat, what to do. You know,
My husband cried the day that he pulled up in front of Henry Community Health, and I got out of the car. He cried. Okay? I'm talking my 290-pound, 5'9" guy. He grabbed my hand. He cried. He said, "God damn it, you better come back to me." And I walked in, and Nick Razor's the one that came and got me. And, you know, I know you have good experiences, you have bad experiences, but I walked into my family when I walked in that door. And I came out, and Ken, and you did too. They took care of you like family. And sorry. I just want to make sure that we reach back out to them and we bolster what they have provided to us.
And I had forgotten that they weren't part of a conglomerate like St. Vincent's or IU Health, that they are more or less independent. And so they don't have the monies that the Ascensions do and the IU Health conglomerates and the Methodist hospitals do, et cetera. So I echo what Corey said. Does anyone disagree that that should be an emphasis as far as healthcare, COVID, shoring up our shortfalls that were determined? You said you had a one-year plan. Looking ahead at learning from the past mistakes, you said there's probably going to be an outbreak of meningitis, or because people put on hold their school immunizations became a lower priority when COVID came to a high priority.
Absolutely.
That wasn't followed up like it once was. My mom was an RN, so she made sure we had every immunization, everything.
Well, and you know, not just, you know, I mean, that's important, but I've recently, and I can share this just singularly, you know, we've got a case of syphilis. Okay? That will kill you. That will kill you dead. That spreads incredibly fast. It is not, it's difficult to detect, and we have not had one of those. And why do we have it now? Because this person couldn't get where they needed to be during this past year.
So a lot of people did not get the screenings, did not see their doctors, they were pretty much shut-ins. A lot of people were afraid to get out. They shut down the surgery units. And I will echo one other thing. They do treat you like family out at Henry County Health.
I have one public health nurse right now, and you all have been very gracious. And I know that if I looked at you, I did. Susan looked at me that night and said, "What do you need?" And boom, I had it. You know, I had that extra nurse. And so, you know, in that one-year plan, I need to have a nurse in that office that can just be COVID, because we're going to have to be able to do some rapid testing. We've got to support these schools. The school nurses, they're getting drugged down too. And we are going to have to continue to provide the vaccine to those who want it and will take it or can take it over the next year. That's above and beyond everything else that Liz has been trying to do. So I'm working, you know, I'm taking every piece of money that the state will give me. I'm doing the best I can, but I've got stuff that's going to end in June, and after June, going forward, I'm not going to have the money to pay the extra staff that I have had currently. I've already talked to Debbie about additional appropriations to get us through till the end of December, and then hopefully put that nurse back another. And it doesn't have to be a full-time person, because I understand the whole benefit package with that. You know, if I could just have another 28-hour person, and I think there would be somebody out there that doesn't need benefits. Shelby right now, she loves her job. She doesn't need benefits, and she's happy to work 4 days a week instead of 5. So
she was our school nurse for a couple of years. Shelby
yes,
was. Yes, I knew her.
She's a good fit.
Okay.
Angela, do you have any idea how long where the hospital is now as far as things like surgery, or how long it will be before they get back to pre-COVID? normal operations?
I think probably we're looking at another solid year before they are back up to running normal. And that is being optimistic that the vaccine does what we project it to do, like we have seen in the history of vaccines, and that the virus doesn't have the ability to mutate like it is in India and everywhere else around the world. So,
Right now, they're not doing, would you say, what, 25% or 50% of the surgeries they used to do?
that's probably a Brian question. I would hope that they're doing at least 50% of what they used to do. And I don't know, I mean, it takes longer. They've got more protocols that they have to go through. People have to get COVID tested ahead of time and that sort of thing. But I think probably, you know, you think about elective surgeries. If people do a lot of things electively that are not detrimental, life-threatening, knee replacements, people are putting those off because, you know, do I want to go in the hospital? You know, and if I can't get out of bed, obviously I'm probably going to go get that knee replacement. But, you know, there's a lot of general type surgeries, I think, what they'll consider elective, that we're certainly not up to par with. And people are not coming into their doctor's visits like they used to. And that's definitely hitting our revenue.
Do you have someone in mind you could invite to be part of our deliberations here as we move forward? From the hospital, for example? Or?
I'll reach out to Brian and Paul and see if there's, you know, somebody in particular. I don't know if Corey Morris maybe is coming to mind, that she might be, thinking about her schedule, she might be able to absolutely liaise between them and us.
Well, I know that the small business, the downturn with the economic side is a major spoke in the ARP. I know the healthcare, COVID, the pandemic impact relating to health field is an emphasis, a spoke in the ARP. So those two are given. For example, if you have someone, and if anyone disagrees, speak up. If you have someone that you would like to add to, let's say your subgroup relating to the economic downturn, the economic development, you with healthcare. The others, I think, like Debbie, I think internally we're going to have to figure out with assistance from the U.S. Treasury and AIC and these organizations, maybe Baker Tilly, our downturn in revenues. That's something internally we're going to have to work on as a group. And I think there'll be more guidelines coming out in the next few weeks. This essential worker extra pay, I don't know if we're looking at business, healthcare, people who are on the front line, I think, and we need more guidance from the feds on that, I think. Here's one. This is the number 6 on my abstract of links that I had provided over the last 5 weeks. University of North Carolina. And this is some of it, a reiteration of what we just talked about. Acceptable expenditures, respond to public health emergency with respect to COVID-19. A subset of that is negative economic impacts, including assistance to households, to small businesses, to nonprofits, or aid impacted industries such as tourism, travel, and hospitality. Grants to nonprofits or a public benefit corporation involved in the transport of passengers or cargo. They're acceptable. Another spoke, if you will, is to respond to workers performing essential work, which is what I just brought up during the health emergency, by providing premium pay, which they do list in other guidance up to $13 an hour above what they normally get paid, with a maximum of $25,000 per person. And a provision for government services, as we pointed out, another major spoke of the reduction of revenues due to the COVID-19 emergency. And we have to go back to the full fiscal year prior to COVID. So we're looking at 2019, right, Debbie? We're looking at that as the baseline and compare that with 2020 and 2021. And that's where we need the guidance. But I think people like Chad working with our auditor department and the treasury and all that, it's going to be able to figure that out, because I do believe they'll give us very detailed guidance on what to do with that. So that's going to maybe be our easiest. I'm not saying man-hours it'll be the easiest, but I think that'll be one that'll be the most straightforward, is figuring out loss and revenues. Corey? You have a thought, I can tell.
Yeah.
He's got a thought bubble up there.
No, headed to another meeting, but before I left, I wanted to mention that we have a lot of planning documents at our disposal that were created with substantial public input. The county comprehensive plan, the stellar development plan. I mentioned earlier about the regional cities initiatives. There are a couple regional development plans that are out there. So just those would be at least worthy of a look through to help guide, particularly from the infrastructure when you talk about water and sewer.
Yes, because I think the county, if I'm not mistaken, spent over $100,000 on the comp plan. We sure want to make sure that that doesn't grow dust on a shelf somewhere. Because $100,000 is fairly significant, and there was a lot of community input into that. So, and I know there was on Stellar a lot of community input on that plan as well. And I think Ed has a comment, because he's reaching for his mute button.
Well, before we get finished here, I know that several people have talked about hiring an outside firm to help us administer some of this money. Baker Tilly has been mentioned. If we're considering that, I would like to see exactly what they would, I would like to see a presentation by them to tell us what they can do for us and how much it costs.
You should have, I have a letter, I can make you a copy. You guys had copies of it at one time, of their costs and what they would do.
Right, they don't come cheap. Here's what they'll do I attached this to the handout I gave you. This is a breakdown of the kinds of services they can provide. And I'm sure there will be that hourly rate that we're quoted for doing our budget plan that they help us with every June, July, August.
Are they doing your 3-year financial plan?
Yes.
They are?
We asked him to another year. And he said on Tuesday night they're starting to work on that. That
Yeah.
probably would be this week, so.
The other thing that I don't know what kind of help we need, but right now there's a whole lot of money out there, federal money and state money, as well as the money we got for the county. And besides a company like ARA, who may be looking at some of that, that money may be much larger than the $9 million. The federal and state money might be a lot more, and we need somebody looking into that on our behalf. And might be good to figure out if we can hire someone to do that. Somebody that we're already used to working with would be good.
I think the piece where they would go out for state and federal funding to match with competitive grants would make them possibly pay for themselves. Have someone-
Eric Fry, sure, thank you,
Thank
Corey.
you.
Be thinking of another person to stage hook, perhaps in this regional planning especially, talent areas and all those others you mentioned. Thank you very much. ARA mentioned, Eric Fry, that they would help us with any of the grants, like HUD, which they have a lot of experience working with the housing area, because they're helping us with one of the stellar components with the housing area, the owner-occupied. USDA has a big component of federal monies that we can tap. And so they said they would help with that, for example. And Jason Simler from Baker Tilly said ARA would probably be a better fit for the federal grants. They would help us with knowing what our budgets are and be able to help us on the accounting side.
It's both. Compliance. Right. Yep. They'll pay for themselves. Yeah.
I think they specialize.
And it is expensive, I mean, no doubt, they are expensive,
Well,
but in many cases, they'll pay for themselves, and then what were to happen if we were to spend a chunk of money that we find out we couldn't have, and now we're backtracking and figuring out, and the feds come knocking with their hand out.
Well, they've said if we mess up, we owe them the money back. They didn't say with interest, but if we do $1 million project and it doesn't fit and they say you owe us $1 million back, that's where we need the guidance so we don't get tripped up and having to pay back $1 million. Right.
And Debbie's already used to working with Baker Tilly on those things.
Right. And they are primed. He asked where we were Tuesday night on, are you going to use us for ARP? And I said, well, I think we're waiting for the U.S. Treasury guidance to see what we get from them, and then we'll make a decision. But
Who asked you that?
Jason Simler asked. You could tell they're anxious because they see a lot of money
Sure.
in these millions that are being distributed around the state. And this is nationwide, and Baker Tilly works nationwide. They don't just work in Indiana. They have offices in San Francisco and what in Chicago. So
Maybe I don't have a good understanding of what ARA does, but I was under the impression, and maybe you can help clear this up, someone in here, that when we hired them to work grants for the county, that if we got grants, it benefits them because they administer the grants and they get paid to administer the grants, and that's how they make their money. So we just paid them a flat fee up front, which wasn't too bad. But, for example, I heard that they wouldn't necessarily work for Memorial Park. Why not? If they could get a grant for Memorial Park, they would make money by administering the grant. So why wouldn't they look there?
they would help them seek grants, but they would not help them develop the plan that they came. His board, just like a school board, oversees everything basically legislative in the school corporation. Their board said this would involve too much time. The 10,000, we got our 10,000's worth with a $250,000 grant that he got for Corey and the EDC, because usually the administrative costs and grants are 5 to 10%. And if they counted 5%, that would be $12,500. We paid him $10,000. We got our money's worth already with the $250,000 grant. His board said this would take hundreds of hours to actually oversee the comprehensive plan for Memorial Park. His board told him that is not part of the contract to seek grants. Yes, if there's a grant as part of that plan for Memorial Park, they would seek and help with grants, but they're not going to oversee and supervise a year-long project because they don't have the staff that would be necessary to do that. So that was my explanation.
That was my
They will help with the grant, they will help get the grant.
They
but they're
will help
not
get
going
the
to
grants.
Administer and oversee the grant, because there's not enough money. Let's say the grant was $200,000, and they got 5% of that,
Well-
10,000.
Well, I think the parks plan is they were actually wanting a comprehensive,
They had a comprehensive plan.
just like we've done for the county, and that was not even tied to a grant, or they just needed all of the background supporting documents that they'll need for a grant in the future, and that is outside of the scope of what they're working.
Yeah, I wouldn't think that would be their job.
No,
But,
you can do that, but it would be an additional charge.
right. But am I correct in assuming that they have access to looking at all different types of grants
Yes.
that may help the county?
Yes.
And whenever they find one,
And they've been
they would alert
successful
us to that.
with some, and they've been
That is their
unsuccessful with
job.
some.
There was a grant for cleaning the ponds at the park or something, they could go after that grant, but they couldn't provide all the background documentation and supporting information that they might need for the grant, such as a comprehensive plan. So, yes, that would be on us to come up with that.
They're basically grant writers. They're grant writers. They're not overseers like Structure Point. Was that the name of the company we hired to do the county comprehensive plan that we paid $110,000 for? They're not going to do that kind of comprehensive plan for Memorial Park for the $10,000 we paid them.
That's good. It is clearer to me now. Thank you.
Okay. We have people in the audience, and I know we said several of us have to be elsewhere at noon. I'm not the chair of this. If you would like to recognize anyone in the audience that came to question or comment, that's not my place because I'm not chair.
Since the audience doesn't look that crowded, does anyone have a question or comment to make?
Just come up to the podium if you do have any comment or thoughts, or you're just here to digest.
That is good.
Surely appreciate your time. It is a rarity to get unexpected monies, and if people are good stewards of it, you will put your fingerprints on this county for decades to come. And you've spent a lot of time talking on things that are urgent, and then we also have things that are important. So you'll wade through that, and I think you're in good hands. Thank you very much for your time. And I'm going to follow Corey to the meeting he's going to. And I'll take Susan with me. We're headed to the EDC meeting, which is our monthly.
Thank you for having interest in what's going on in the county. Other comments relating to ARP? We do have monies coming for food and beverage too, and I think we have applicants for most of those positions, if I'm not mistaken. I haven't heard from the Newcastle Council. Has anybody heard if they appointed anyone? Everyone,
Anything for Newcastle? Yeah. This is
okay. Well, anyway, relating to monies that we will be having available to us to look at in 2021, that's just another one of those things. The federal giving money, the state's got money relating to COVID, and we've got some local monies as well that we'll be looking at in 2021. So we need to strategically look at all that, combine as revenues to spend wisely.
One project you might add to that list, I don't even feel like we are at the point where we're starting to pick projects, but this one is costing us money just about every month, and I'm not sure we have any good estimates yet. But the plumbing out in our Memorial Park is pitiful. We don't know exactly where everything is. We have leaks that sometimes cost us in the thousands. and I think it's a relatively simple project to replace all the plumbing in that park. I don't have an estimate yet. I think they're working on it. But that certainly ought to be on our list because it's costing us money every month. And it costs us, it's not helping us any when we have a park that's hardly using any water, costing us thousands of dollars every month because it's leaking someplace.
I think that would
Falls
be
under
maybe
infrastructure.
in the collaboration with infrastructure, Newcastle, regional. Yeah, I think that would be in that
There may even
zone.
be some money through Okra.
Mm-hmm.
Federal monies through, we met on the EIRPC. I don't know if you probably heard some of that, but Okra has some money to do infrastructure projects. So it definitely would be advantageous to look at all those avenues, and that's where maybe this is a question for ARA. Hey, this is what we've got. What options do we have?
First thing we do is find out how much it costs.
Yeah.
You said they're working on estimates, or someone's working on estimates. Well, it definitely falls under ARP, probably falls under Okra, probably falls under CBDG.
Okra money is ARP money too. There's tons as part of that federal money that's out there through the ARP.
And that's CDBG and Okra gets their monies from the feds, and they're getting an extra pool of money through this ARP going to the state. Yes.
I believe the ERPC said we were going to get 5 times more money for infrastructure this year because of the ARP money than what their normal year is.
So one of the things we talked before you came in, Chad, was putting a pause on and seeing what the feds are doing to the states, what the states are filtering through Okra or CBDG or to the towns and to the counties, and some of these other grants that we talked about, like READY. Is that the one that you mentioned, the governor's READY? There's a lot of money being put out to the state, to the towns, to the cities, to the counties. And that's where that collaboration we talked about earlier would come in. Well, let's see what they're doing so we're not duplicating, but if we can collaborate, and that's one of the things Corey was talking about, I think, before you came. There's several regional, including the EIRPC, that they belong to. One's kind of north, and we're the southern county of the group up north. Well, yeah, I don't know. Yes. And there's one in the south where we're the kind of the northern county. So he mentioned 3, including the EIRPC. So we kind of need to know what the left and the right hands are doing, so we're not duplicating, and where possible that we collaborate with them.
I absolutely agree. It's 9 million sounds like an enormous number, but it's a pittance compared to what's really out
Well,
there.
the needs are probably 100 million. So that's where we need to really prioritize and strategically plan for the future, because this will be a one-time. I don't foresee, the infrastructure may affect us, but it may not, I don't know. And we don't even know if that's going to pass Congress or not, or if it does, what form and how much. But what's the burning issues, because several of us are supposed to be elsewhere at noon.
Bobby, did you mention
I mean-
yet the 109 corridor? Or
I did mention it specifically in general.
that's another idea that had been brought forward.
What was that? I didn't
The
hear it.
109 corridor for sewer and water.
Yeah, running
Oh,
water and
Nicetown.
sewer, yeah. Mm-hmm.
They have their own
It would be
TIF unit.
Yes,
They
they
have
do.
their own TIF
I
there,
think
too.
they have about 500,000 in that TIF.
And Stellar, we talked about adding an exchange at
103?
103. That was going to be $100,000 just for the study,
Mm-hmm.
through NDOT study. And so that didn't make our final cut of 24. It was in our 55 list, but the
But
24.
just like what we were just talking about, the different funding sources for that project are there's multiple. And it'll be like that for all of these. So we'll be putting up matching funds and getting monies, and this is why we need other people to help us.
So do we want to, before we set the next meeting, do we want to ask Jason or Paige or somebody to give us a presentation? If so, it'll be this group, or it'll be the commissioners, will it be the council? I will say the guy from Hendricks County, mentioned at our budget and finance workshop that we had prior to the district meeting. He said, we work so well with the commissioners. He says, I know a lot of counties don't work closely. He said, we meet monthly as a combined work session and have for years. And he says that helps us so much because you have your responsibilities by law. We have our budget and finance responsibilities by law. And there's a lot of overlap. And he mentioned that in a webinar or a Zoom that Betsy and I participated in about a month earlier. He spoke on that Zoom of the Association of Indiana Counties and said, you counties that are not working closely with your commissioners, because this was a county council Zoom, he said, you're missing out. And he mentioned that again near the end of our meeting that we had, that Jackie helped present, which was for auditors. It was so over our head. Like Beth,
I learned to appreciate the auditor.
I was going to say, I had so much appreciation for the auditor's office. I said, Form 4B and form this and form that, and we have to do this before that, and then this, and they changed this the last year, and this form's no longer. I go,
It's the way it is every day.
That's why we do the auditors, why we have and why that office is so important. But be looking at your calendars for future dates. What else?
I have from the banks, interest rates.
Yes.
On kind of like it's a public funds money market accounts from them. And Citizens and Star are both 0.20 because we don't have money in First Financial. They wouldn't give us a good rate, but they want to come and talk. First Merchants is 0.25.
Oh, that's,
We have a lot at First Merchants, yes. Yeah. So First Merchants is 0.25.
well, 9.3 million setting the difference between 0.2 and 0.25 would add up, right? I mean, we're talking maybe $10,000 over a year or something, but it's not chicken feed.
Well, I mean, it's exactly.
Do the commissioners need to make some kind of
When we
decision
get
at
the
a meeting?
money and I figure out how I have to do it, what we have to do to do it, then,
That involve an attorney putting something together or no?
no, I don't think so. I don't think anybody has to act on it. We can
Okay.
just move the money because you guys have already approved to use First Merchants Bank.
Thank you, Angela. So, and we have the Duns, and we have the Sams, all the stuff that the
Yes.
NICO said we needed, we have all that in order, so.
Yeah, we have to have that for the grants we have, so we already have all that stuff.
So all the pre-thing.
The ordinance is in place, the account number is in place.
Yeah, the commissioner's ordinance you passed on
Yeah.
April 28th, I think.
Yeah, so we have everything ready, just, it should be here probably Monday or Tuesday.
Jason from Baker Tilly did say this, which is counter to what we've been saying. He said, you should be starting to work on your projects, coming up with ideas. And we came up with general ideas, categories of ideas. And then when we get the guidance from the Treasury, if there's any of them that we said, we can't do that, we just X them off. But he said, you should be thinking about projects now, whether it's just Henry County or in collaboration with area towns, cities, and counties, like these, what do you call them, RDAs, Regional Development Associations that Corey brought up. I mean, it's going to take us time to work through that, but he said that one has a deadline of June to August.
Yeah, that's the Governor Hoppen READY program.
The READY program.
We just might, give them a couple, 3 months after they come out with the guidelines. Because, last time we got money, they came out with guidelines, we
changed
followed them, and 3 months later, I was changing that because the guidelines changed, and then yet another 3 months after that, and then in the end, it was totally blown out of the water.
I did read somewhere where they said they learned something from that, and they're really hopeful that they learned lessons from the CARES and the constant changes, that hopefully they won't go through as many significant changes as they did with CARES. And I read that someplace. What are future dates? We probably ought to meet monthly. If you disagree, speak up, but monthly at least in our planning process, I would be thinking about, and we didn't answer the question, do we bring Baker Tilly in to talk commissioners, to talk council, or do we combine a work session where they come in? Or do they talk at our next meeting that's combined? Okay, so would this be the same meeting? A combined meeting or a combined work session would work, would it not?
I would like to do it together. Why have two meetings?
I agree. Do we want to plan a work session? Is Susan still here? Do-
If you're gonna do that and you're gonna act on it, you should probably just do it as a special meeting.
Special
and not a
meeting.
work session, or, I mean, if you're gonna think you're gonna act on it, if you don't think you're going to, but you can't act on anything in a work session.
Well, maybe we ought to have a special meeting in case we do want to act on it. If we hear what they say and we want to do it, we could do it instead of having to set another session together.
Okay, well, I think we should have whatever special meeting we need to decide what type of special meeting we need.
Can you repeat that? No. For the minutes, no.
I guess we don't have to decide that exactly today, but we can.
No.
Yeah, we
But
can.
how about our next work session? Can we look at our calendars and see? I don't know when Tisha's going to come in on the JCAP, but surely the date we set won't be the date, well, it might be the date that she said she's available. 3 weeks from today is May 27th. June 3rd is, and Angela said Friday's terrible for her, so Wednesdays and Thursdays are best for some people. Is June 3rd bad for anyone? That's 4 weeks from today. And do we want to get with Susan and Ed to see if we can come up with a combined meeting before June 3rd?
It's okay. I said second and fourth, I could.
Do we want to have a combined actual meeting, combined meeting before June 3rd or after June 3rd?
I would say probably before.
Okay.
What do you say? For Baker Tilly.
No, June 3rd for our
before June
next
3rd.
ARP work session together. Okay,
48
June
hours.
3rd
They
for the
should have to
next
know
work
48 hours.
session. What dates are we looking back? When's your regular meetings? 12th and 26th, commissioners? Ours is 20th. No, it's not, it's 27th. So 26th and 27th, we already have meetings.
Could you do it on like the day of the commissioners' meeting? Well, no, I mean, you could either do it at the beginning or have it, the joint meeting an hour before the commissioners' meeting. I don't know. It's just a thought. I guess before we set a date, but should we not contact Baker Tilly?
Right. I'll tell them what we're thinking as possibilities and see if they're available and get back with everyone. Is that okay? I do too. Okay, do you want?
I have to work.
Do I have a motion to adjourn? Second. Second. All those in favor?